This is Marco Reus.
This is Shinji Kagawa.
This is Nuri Shahin.
Hello, this is Jadon Sancho.
And you're listening to the Yellowwall podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 403 of the Yellowwallpod. I'm your host Stefan Butzko, and today we will talk about Borussia Dortmund's highest win in the Champions League, and we will preview the small Revierderby, also known as the 18. Heimspiel, usually, but not in COVID times, against VfL Bochum, a game where I'm obviously looking forward to, even though I cannot attend. And obviously there's more stuff, more Bayern game aftermath to discuss. And for all that and more, joins me the beautiful Lars Pollmann. Hello, Lars. How are you doing?
Better now that you are calling me beautiful, Stefan. And also, happy birthday.
Thank you.
If people are allowed to know this.
Yes, they are. Yes, I indeed age.
Sweet 40 years old today.
Yes, it's not a round birthday. I think, are we the same age? I forgot.
But I'm almost 6 months your senior, obviously.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Yes. You are just as old as Lars Reagan, as everyone knows. So that also reveals my age now. So, I just scrolled down in my notes file and see that I have had no time to prepare and did not write anything down. But I don't need notes for this, because I do know that Jude Bellingham has been fined by now. Obviously, we discussed the entire controversy with Josh from JJTV on the Monday episode, which I recommend to anyone who hasn't heard it yet. But Lars, nevertheless, I know people out there are very intrigued of what you think about this entire thing. I mean, 40,000 is not nothing. I don't know if it's the highest fine ever, but it's certainly a judgment by the DFB that Jude Bellingham was in the wrong to say what he said. And if you want to get into the whole apology, not apology, offering of a conversation by Zwayer, you can do that as well. So I'm just gonna say that you can just have free flowing thoughts on this subject now.
Well, first of all, I think it's the same amount in terms of the fine that Markus Thuram of Gladbach had to pay for spitting in someone's face at I think it was even during Corona times, but might have been just before. I think it's in the same ballpark, at least, of what
some people say he was spitting facts. So
yeah. I think it's the same ballpark as Kevin De Bruyne had to pay for insulting a ball boy. I don't necessarily remember the episode, but people brought it up when discussing what was going to happen to Bellingham. So I think it was obvious from the start that the German FA weren't going to suspend him because of the optics, seeing as Bellingham did point out things that were true. I mean, Zwayer did take money to impact a game. Whether he ever actually did, come through on the bribe is very much disputed and has never been proven. So I guess that's also kind of the point why he wasn't going to get away scot-free. I think the biggest issue is that Bellingham kind of made the insinuation that the refereeing decisions on Saturday evening were impacted by Zwayer's past transgressions and possibly him having been bought, which, I mean, we can talk as much as we want about the Bayern bonus in the Bundesliga, but I don't think anyone really thinks that Oliver Kahn slipped Felix Zwayer an envelope on Saturday morning or whenever. So I think
the annoying part is they get this for free.
Yeah, I mean, which happens to every leading team in every leading league. I mean, you can talk about Manchester United having a bonus under Sir Alex Ferguson. Juventus definitely had a bonus, and there were also envelopes
I was just going to say,
involved,
bad example.
But, Real Madrid, Barcelona, every team that's on top for a long time has, the direct pathway to the hearts and minds of referees. It's just the way it is. And I mean, you can also make the case that Dortmund in games against lower level sides have benefited from that in the not so distant past. So nobody's actually saying that Zwayer was bought for this one. So in that sense, I think it's pretty fair to say that Bellingham couldn't get away scot-free. I think 40,000 seems pretty much an appropriate amount. He'll get over it. I think when all is said and done, I think we can probably say that Felix Zwayer is not going to referee any Dortmund games in the next couple of years. And I'm kind of glad someone paid 40,000 for that, because as we all know, Zwayer just shouldn't be a referee at this level. So I'm kind of positive that he's not going to have any Dortmund games in the near future.
Yeah, I think maybe that's actually a positive knock-on effect, and I'm glad you bring this up, because Lars, you were one of those people who said already before the game, and in general, in not just before the Bayern game, that Zwayer should not be a referee. I think on Twitter you said to someone that being a German referee is a privilege, not a right. And maybe in your opinion, he has forgone that privilege. So, I totally agree with the sentiment. I think if you've been found guilty of that, it's really hard to be reintegrated into the refereeing profession, if you will, because what happened is exactly what can happen. And now, there's obviously a lot of doubt about the entire, decision making from the German FA around Felix Zwayer, and this can always boil up around him again. And it's just a jaded referee in this regard. And it's obviously also a bit dubious that he has had this stellar career, because as I pointed out when the site came out with the bombshell of that he actually has been found guilty of some aspects of match fixing or taking money. That was literally 2 months after he'd been named the German referee of the year or something. And it's unbecoming, let's put it this way. And I just don't think that Felix Zwayer is that good of a referee to deserve to all these accolades, to be honest. And one thing that really annoys me still is also the gaslighting by the German FA. First of all, the interview by Jochen Drees, because I don't know how you see it, but I think there was clear contact on Marco Reus's leg, for example. That Hernandez just hit him there, and to say that there wasn't any. I don't know. I find it a bit difficult, and to sort of say, oh well, it was offside anyway the next day, doesn't help anyone either. So, what are your thoughts on the entire, I think allegation from Dortmund fans and players and officials that double standards were applied in what was reviewed and what wasn't?
I mean, it's clearly obvious that they didn't uphold the same standard in both instances, because obviously Zwayer both saw the contact between Hernandez and Reus and deemed it not sufficient for a penalty, which, I mean, fair enough. And he also saw that Hummels handled the ball inside his own box. And I don't necessarily understand why when he asked the Kölner Keller, the VAR assistants, about whether or not he had missed something in the Hernandez situation with Reus, why they said no, and then when he asked the same question with Hummels, they said yes and made him trot out to the sideline. So, I mean, it's obvious that he didn't have the same standard for those two things, and it's also obvious that he didn't uphold the standard of his own refereeing performance when assessing the Hummels situation, because, I mean, still, handball isn't black and white. There's intent to be judged, There's also, circumstance. I mean, Hummels was in a 3-man sandwich basically and had someone's hand in his face a couple of seconds before fondling the ball with his hand. So I think, which is something that basically Dres, the VAR chief in Germany, as you mentioned earlier, kind of admitted that, that the better call would have been to not give a penalty for Bayern either, or, give both. But obviously then Dortmund would have been taken away by the offsides call, but I definitely agree, and I also said it was gaslighting. They didn't check for offside on Saturday evening because they didn't have to, because they deemed the contact insufficient for a penalty review, or just awarding a penalty outright. And so they didn't even look for offside. They didn't apply the lines on the pitch to see whether Haaland was just about offside, which apparently he was, even though I don't think anyone's shown me anything official. Just the entire process once again shows how flawed the implementation of VAR is in Germany still after, 3.5 years or so. And, remembering, for example, the World Cup in Russia 2018, that was kind of, I think, from an international standpoint, the golden standard of VAR. And it's kind of shocking that 3.5 years later it's gotten markedly worse, especially in Germany, but also I watch a lot of Italian football, obviously being an Inter fan, and VAR and the Serie A doesn't really work. Champions League, we saw Michael Oliver not rescind the red card for Mats Hummels in what was one of the most blatant mistakes anyone's made in the last few months in terms of referees. And so I think it once again proves that even if you are a fan of the idea of VAR, which I definitely was back when they introduced it, it's just the implementation doesn't work. Takes away too much from the game for the results it brings. So once again, just scrap the thing, use it for offside calls or anything that is black and white. Did the ball cross the sideline or whatever? Even that is not really black and white because the camera angles usually don't tell you all the story. So other than that, I think VAR is kind of dead in the water, even though the people who decided don't see it that way.
Yeah. I said before, I think I'm just long-term butthurt when it comes to refereeing decisions between Dortmund and Bayern, just because there is such a litany of decisions that went, in my opinion, the wrong way, and that heavily disadvantaged Dortmund in so many close games. One of the hardest one to swallow still is to me that Dante wasn't sent off in the Champions League final after he literally kicked Royce in the stomach and he was already on a yellow card. It obviously was a penalty call. At least we got that one, but still, very hard to take for me. And there are about 8 million situations where Franck Ribéry should have been sent off because he can't keep his hands or elbows to himself. And obviously, Xavi Alonso survived a lot of bookable offenses in certain games. And you have, I think, the Boateng handball, and then there's one cup final goal where the ball was over the line for 40 centimeters. I think scored by Hummels that didn't count. And I don't know, there are just so many examples of Bayern profiting from a refereeing call in high-profile games between Dortmund and Bayern. That's, it is very annoying. And if you then have the narratives of, Bayern picking off Dortmund's best players over several years, I think there's just a baseline of bitterness from Dortmund fans that I can understand. There's a lot of vitriol coming out of the Dortmund camp if something like that happens. The elbow situation by Jerome Boateng where he blocked a Haaland shot. Was it last season? It's also a very weird call that this one wasn't given. And I think it just adds up, and I just hope going forward that Dortmund have maybe done enough by now that referees even if it's just due to this one shitstorm that referees, are a bit more or apply the same standard to both teams. That would help. Obviously, what I really want, Lars, and that's maybe not the best sportsmanship, but that's just me. I would really love to win a game against Bayern on one absolutely egregious call. I feel like that would help me just personally to have some catharsis. But other than that, I think we can move on from that game. And unless you have anything to say, talk about the Besiktas game.
Maybe just on Zwayer once again. I think people are making all kinds of assumptions that rehabilitation is a thing and that he shouldn't be held too much accountable for something he did as a 24-year-old or whatever, and it was only 300 euros. But to me, once again, being a top-level referee is not a right but a privilege, and he has, in my opinion, forfeited it. And we are not making Felix Zwayer or turning him into a social pariah. We just don't want him to referee Bundesliga games or even second division, third division games. In my opinion, as I said, he doesn't deserve it. And clearly, when an 18-year-old Englishman who's been in the country for 1.5 years knows about something that happened when he was 1 year old, or not even a 1 year old, in a third division at the time game, that shows that it's, behind closed doors, something people talk about in the league, or maybe he read up on it, but I don't know how many players do studies on, the referees for the next few games. So I'm assuming that it was talked about in some capacity.
I don't know. Maybe he just read it on Twitter because people have been talking about this too. Or he listened to us at the Yellowwallpod. If so, hey Jude, and heard you or me say it.
Yeah, still, what it shows you is that at least this one player, and I think it's fairly likely to assume that he's not the unicorn, but and no exception to a rule or whatever, that the players are talking about it or thinking about it. And when such a thing happens, I think you have to ask yourself how could they possibly respect a referee like that? And as such, I think this should be in any other FA or in any other sport, perhaps even should be something like a nail in the coffin for Zweyer's refereeing career. But given the reaction of all the top hats, the Dreses and the Fröhlichs and other referees, I think it's fair to say that Zwayer is still going to be protected by the higher ups in the German FA. So, as I said earlier, the best thing for Dortmund to come out of the entirety of this thing, I would even argue that he didn't even cost them the game, because quite frankly, you can give the penalty for Bayern and Dortmund's penalty wouldn't have counted. So ultimately we are talking about, something that felt bad at the time, but the decisions weren't, absolutely egregiously against Dortmund when all is said and done.
Yeah,
so the best thing to come out of it, the best thing to come out of it is that there's no way they are going to appoint Zwayer to a Dortmund game anytime soon.
Yeah. It's just a very weird situation, and I 100% agree with what you just said, that at the end of the day, Zwayer is maybe not the one to ultimately blame for Dortmund's loss. Obviously, I would have preferred it had he kept his standard and not given the penalty, but you can give this penalty. You can obviously also say, well, Hummels was shoved by Müller, and between Bellingham, as you said, there's a lot of gray there. But Dortmund also just made a lot of mistakes, and it's in so many aspects just a very frustrating result, because I feel like Bayern were there for the taking, and had Dortmund just one normal game as you requested, this might have been 3 points, and Dortmund would be top of the Bundesliga table now. Instead, it's a 4 points deficit. But before we talk about that, let's talk about the 2.8 million euros apparently Dortmund earned themselves with a 5-0 win over Besiktas. And I just opened FBref and saw that Besiktas' expected goals was 0.0. And last, if we talk about match fixing already, Do you think everything was on the up and up with how Besiktas played here? Because that was really bad.
I mean, I think obviously you always have to tread a bit lightly, even though you are, speaking tongue in cheek.
Just say allegedly, it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, if Besiktas came out of, a good run of form in Turkey, maybe there was something smelling off here, but I mean, they've been terrible, or not necessarily terrible, but from what I gather, because obviously I don't watch the Super League, they haven't necessarily had the greatest runs of form at home, and the Champions League game for them was completely pointless outside of gaining a bit of money, which I guess would have been hard to do at Dortmund, because Dortmund are clearly a better team. And today their head coach resigned. They are actually going to appoint Daniel Farke,
really?
Which it's quite interesting in terms of a fit for him. So I mean, given that circumstantial evidence, I would probably assume that Besiktas are just kind of shit at this point. And I mean, given how the game turned out, especially with the sending off, which I actually think wasn't completely wrong, because the player didn't have a chance at the ball and kind of hacked away at Dahoud, even though it wasn't too harsh. I mean, he didn't have a chance at the ball, so that's one of the things referees look at. So especially at that point, I think it was pretty obvious that it was going to be a bit of a drubbing. And then when Dortmund can bring on Erling Haaland, who's hungry for goals because he has to wait at least half a year before he returns to the Champions League, which is more like 9 months actually, then a scoreline like this can happen. But obviously, especially talking about Reus's second goal when he walked through the entirety of Besiktas' non-existent defense, that was certainly, I mean, a low point for Besiktas, I'm sure. But I mean,
it was also a nice goal.
Every year I think Dortmund cannot possibly face worse opponents in the Champions League, starting with Legia Warsaw back in the day. Brugge last year were absolute shite, but Besiktas definitely take the cake. And I actually also looked at every ref today, and they had a cumulative expected goal difference of -12 for these 6 games. The best in positive terms is Bayern with plus 10.6, I think. So that shows you that for as great as Bayern were winning all 6 games, Besiktas losing all 6 were even worse than Bayern were great. So I mean, that kind of says it all. And especially if we want to look at it from a Dortmund perspective, I think we learned absolutely nothing. I mean, Nico Schulz had probably his best day in a Dortmund shirt, but it was against like a cardboard opponent, so who cares?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's nice for Malen to score again, obviously, but
it wasn't even a good goal. I mean,
no, yeah, the
goalkeeper keeps it out.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, Haaland had a couple of headers where his opponent just didn't mark him, didn't go up for it. I don't know what was going on there, but yeah, it's not really a game worth to talk about much, to be honest. I don't know when the Europa League draw is. I think it's also on Monday, so we'll then find out who Dortmund play next in that competition. It's at least nice that Dortmund didn't concede and didn't make this game a two-way meme street. So at least we've got that going for us, which is very nice. So Lars, with that being said, we can move on to the next match against VfL Bochum, and obviously, I personally wish I were there to enjoy some delicious bratwurst and just the entire atmosphere of the Stadion an der Kassower Straße is just I don't know, it's Ruhrpott-Romantik, if you will. I absolutely love going to Bochum games. I did so very often when I was in my teenager years. I made the trip over because it just takes half an hour or so from door to door, if you will, at least for me. And I like it there. It's obviously it's a Revierderby, but as much as I hate Schalke, I really have a lot of sympathy for Bochum, and I'm just very glad they're featuring in the Bundesliga. So, now that I said all this, Lars, this is obviously a must-win for Dortmund. Bochum have a really good record so far. I mean, they've gotten 6 wins already this season. That's not bad at all. They just beaten Freiburg, Augsburg, win against Hoffenheim, against Frankfurt, and this 1-0 against Kräuter Fürth, also very important for them, I guess. And a win against Mainz. But obviously, they've also been absolutely shellacked by Bayern. I think there was a 7-0 loss or so. So what do Dortmund have to do to, come away with all 3 points in, what will probably feel more like a second or third round in the German Cup?
I wholeheartedly disagree with that last sentence. Bochum are very fundamentally sound, to borrow a term from the NFL. They don't beat themselves. Obviously, they don't have, the greatest individual talents, and a few important players also missing through injury, quarantine, long-term injury. But, fundamentally sound. They don't beat themselves. They are truly well coached by Thomas Reis. And at home, they have a record of 4 wins, 1 draw, 1 defeat in 6 games, which is like the 4th or so best in the league after Dortmund, Bayern, and Hoffenheim or something. So, I mean, you look at Bochum as a promoted side, as, very much the younger brother in this sort of rivalry. You look at them getting pummeled by Bayern, but that was in Munich, so it doesn't really apply. So I think this is a much harder game than people, who don't really look at Bochum much. Why should they?
But it definitely, to me, is the hardest game left in the calendar. I think this is harder than
I think
Fürth or Hertha.
Away to Hertha on Saturday evening in cold, windy Olympiastadion, that sounds harder to me. Especially since, even though they've won a few of the last few trips, it always feels like Dortmund shoot themselves in the foot in Berlin. So I think both of them have the potential to be, a bit more difficult than looking at the table and looking at the disparity in terms of individual quality. One might think, but I would still agree that, obviously it is kind of a must win. I mean, against the promoted side, if you have the highest of ambitions, and especially after coming away from Bayern with 0 points, losing a bit of ground to Leverkusen in 3rd. You want to return to winning ways in the league, and as I said, a promoted side, even away from home, there's not really much else but a win you can expect. But I just want to point out that it's presumably going to be more difficult than people kind of expect going into the game.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with this assessment. Bochum have not really made it easy for anyone, especially in Bochum, and I think the stadium will be half full at least. So that's not nothing, a lot of the Zweite Bundesliga games have had less of a crowd in non-COVID times, to be honest, and the atmosphere was still pretty good. So it's a game I'm looking really forward to. Obviously, I'm not entirely sure if Riemann will be fit or not. Manuel Riemann, I think, has been an absolutely fantastic goalkeeper for them, and I think you can say he is a bit of the heart and soul of that team. Not just him, but I think he's a very vocal goalkeeper, and also very ambitious for the player that he is. So kudos to Bochum for having a really good goalkeeper, because
great penalty taker too.
Is that so?
Don't tell me you forgot that he absolutely skied it against Hoffenheim.
I didn't see it. I'm sorry.
That was basically a goal kick. You have to look it up. It's one of the most ridiculous penalties in recent Bundesliga memory. Absolutely. I mean, it would have been a field goal from like 45 yards.
Well, I haven't seen that one, unfortunately, but at least he's taking responsibility, so there's that. But yeah, obviously, a tough blow was that Simon Zoller, I think, picked up an injury relatively early in the season. I think he's back on a training ground, but obviously not going to return anytime soon, if I'm informed correctly. But they did have the prolific services of Sebastian Polter, who obviously, is a very cheeky striker, if you will. How would you describe his qualities?
Körperklaus, which is a German term for this type of striker, typically German or Swedish or Nordic, blonde, tall, big. Likes to leave the elbow in there a little bit, as you said, kind of cheeky. Used to play for Union Berlin, which was a perfect fit. The kind of guy that doesn't strike you as the most prolific goal scorer or whatever, will probably end the season, with high single digits or digit goal tallies, but is a pain in the ass to play against, especially as a defender. So, Mats Hummels and presumably Dan-Axel Zagadou have, an interesting 90 minutes ahead of them, I think, because this is the kind of guy that absolutely gets under a centre-back's skin, if you will.
Yeah, that was actually going to be the next topic of conversation, because when you, laid eyes on Twitter as Dortmund published the lineup for the Besiktas game, you will have seen... And maybe the bagel in your hand fell down or whatever and landed on the cream cheese side. That Manuel Akanji had...
Speaking from experience, or...?
No, not at all. That Manuel Akanji had minor knee surgery and will be out for the rest of the year. Obviously, he is expected to be back, according to Kicker at least, for the Bundesliga match, the first one of 2022 against Frankfurt, but nevertheless, nothing you like to read, just, casually dropped on Twitter. Dortmund have to accommodate for that. Obviously, they have Big Zach back, who played okay against Besiktas, but as you said, that's not really much of a litmus test at all. And of course, you have Pongracic as well. Do you think that Hummels and Zagadou are an okay partnership right now, or do you think that it's time to worry?
I mean, given that Akanji has clearly been Dortmund's best centre half for months now, certainly weakens them. But I think it's kind of safe to assume that they looked at the schedule of, the late stages of 2021 and identified these 3 games as a spell of games in which if you lose because you don't have Manuel Akanji, I think you lose because you do a lot of mistakes. So, I mean, if I can't really see a scenario in either of these 3 games where you say, well, they would have won that with Akanji. So it makes sense to get the surgical, whatever the fact it was, out of the way.
Yeah, not that we will know, because why be transparent about anything?
Yeah, I mean, it's not about HIPAA, I can say that much, but I mean, going back to your initial question, I think kind of feels like Rose and his coaching staff. Obviously, Rose is suspended. I guess we should mention that at some point.
My initial question was, are we fucked?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think Rose and his coaching staff have kind of been more open to the idea of playing Hummels on the right, which he never used to do, basically. So him and Zagadou definitely my preferred option. I think Pongracic came on pretty strong early in his loan deal to Dortmund, but has made a lot of mistakes recently, and clearly seems now like the stopgap that he was signed to be. If otherwise they wouldn't have almost rushed Zagadou back into the starting lineup against Besiktas. I don't believe he exerted himself so much that he can't play against Bochum, just because, as you alluded to earlier, Besiktas didn't do anything going forward, so Zagadou only had to, cover like 20 yards off the pitch, where usually it would be 40 or 50, so he should be fine. And it's definitely the pairing with the most upside that is going to be available to them. So yeah, I think it should be fine. Zagadou doesn't quite have the speed of Akanji to help out when Hummels steps up a bit too far, which he tends to do from time to time. but he should definitely be able to handle Polter in aerial duels and, doesn't take shit from strikers usually. So that's actually a kind of a decent match for Bochum, for, Polter, as we talked about earlier.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, Bochum will, throw everything they have with Asano, Holtmann, and I guess if you want to count him, Rex Bejai, who
Holtmann is actually out.
He's out?
Well. No, Blum is out. Sorry, Blum is out.
Okay. Well,
yeah. And Asano is also out, so 3 attacking players.
Oh, he's out too.
Counting also Zoller. Asano, I think it's not quite clear at this point, at the point of recording, but they have a COVID case in Bochum, and 2 individuals who haven't been identified have to go into quarantine. And then when Thomas Reis said that Asano and Blum, I think it was those 2, aren't available, but didn't really give a reason, people assumed that at least one of them was ordered into quarantine. So whatever the case may be, Bochum with Zoller, Asano and Blum are without 3 of their more prolific attacking players. So
yeah. I mean, to me, what's the most important tactical thing that Dortmund need to do in order to contain Bochum, I think, is to make sure that Logia, I think you pronounce him, cannot unfurl himself, does not enjoy any freedoms. I don't even care if you man mark him, because I think if you cut him off and cut him out, then Bochum are struggling to counterattack, to have switches of play and all these kinds of things, and especially if they play with a back 5. I assume that they will obviously try to attack a lot through the wings, but if you cut off the guy in their center, that's going to hamper their build up a lot. So that's probably the number one thing I would say. That all being said, I haven't watched too many Bochum games actually, even though I was so happy that they're back that I can't really talk in detail about their playing style, other than that they're well organized and that they know how to carry the ball forward. I thought that they have a really relatively decent ball progression, whether be it with sort of a kick and rush approach, but also a ball on the ground approach. So it's not the Darmstadts of the world coming up. Let's put it this way. I think they play a really good ball considering the amount of talent they have. So I think a lot of credit really goes to Reis for the for the coaching of this team, because the positional play I think is always really good, and the avoidance of mistakes, as far as I've seen in especially also highlights, is something we need to talk about as well in highlighting Bochum, because it really matters if you can cut out individual mistakes or not. So let's put the focus a little bit on the Dortmund part of things. Torgan Hazard is at least back in the squad. From what I hear, Julian Brandt has passed some sort of concussion test or whatever it was. And maybe he'll be included in the squad as well. Obviously, Daniel Malen might be out with some sort of flu. Lars, if Hazard and Brandt can both play, I think that's still going to be a big boost for Dortmund, and should just add to the players available right now. I don't know if Rose said anything about Meunier, because I think he had to be subbed off from the Besiktas game because he felt something in his legs. But if we assume that Dortmund play a similar lineup to the one that they used for the Bayern game, I think this is a very strong lineup, and I'm very optimistic about 3 points if they play like that, especially if they manage to find Haaland very often, because he looks like he is already in great form since returning from his injury.
Yeah, but I would be surprised if they went with the Bayern approach, because obviously Rose added a third central midfielder. They played with Can, Bellingham and Dahoud. Feels kind of unnecessary against Bochum. So
you take out Can?
Yeah, I mean,
Duh.
why not? Obviously, Dawood played quite a bit, only returning from injury. Bellingham was out before the Bayern game, so assuming everything is fine and all things being equal, then obviously Dawood Bellingham would be your usually preferred choice for a game at Bochum. So I don't know why that wouldn't be the case, but obviously if Brandt and Azar aren't fit to play from the start, or in terms of Brandt, I'm sure they're not going to take any risks from, a neurological perspective or whatever, then maybe because of the lack of options for the natural wingers, I wouldn't be shocked if they once again went with three central midfielders. And I should even point out that Bellingham didn't necessarily play as his usual number 8 or whatever against Bayern. He was roaming quite a bit to the left, which was kind of a stroke of genius from Rose and his staff, because Bellingham had such a strong performance, especially going forward. 2 assists against Bayern, if I'm not mistaken. 2 assists again in the Champions League. So, I mean, Bellingham can basically do it all, so I'm not really worried about personnel. Do you know about Gio Reyna's availability rest of the year, by chance?
No, I don't think there's going to be much of an availability at all, to be honest. I think he's still...
Because it felt like to me this coaching staff is kind of happy to get players back into the groove of things a bit quicker than perhaps...
I mean, he might be included in the matchday squad. Maybe he's there making a trip to Berlin or so, but... I don't know if that means he'll get serious playing time, but obviously I'm not there and I don't know. So there's that. But it's kind of weird, because obviously when you have Brandt and Hazard in there, there's a much higher chance to win this game than, let's say, you play with Wolf and Can. So, yeah, I don't know what the other options would be. Maybe, and that's something to think about with Nico Schulz coming off of his best ever performance, put him into the left back slot and then play Guerrero somewhere up front. That's something I could think of stuff Dortmund could do to alleviate if more attacking midfielders are out. But, yeah, otherwise I wouldn't really know what else to do. Cool. Yeah, Lars, should we then go over to scoreline predictions? Or oh no, actually there was one thing I wanted to ask you. There are 2 players that are on 4 yellow cards right now. One is Bellingham and one is Meunier. Do you think both should try to get this booking so they don't have to play against Fürth? Because I would hate it for Bellingham, for example, to miss against Hertha or Frankfurt or whatever. I mean,
if the opportunity presented itself without being too obvious, then sure. I mean, I think especially Bellingham, I think the German FA are going to have a pretty close look at whatever he does in the next few games. So if he goes for a blatant offense to miss the third game, then I think there's an option to be punished further. So I think I would usually just let these things play out the way they play out. I mean, you never know who's going to be available for any given game. I mean, Bellingham missed the game anyway. So yeah, I mean, if you can do it, subtly, and it makes sense also in terms of the game. I mean, we don't know the referee, because apparently only Felix Zwayer gets appointed 5 days early in the Bundesliga. If the referee is very lenient and you have to almost break someone's leg to get a yellow card, then I would advise against it. But I mean, if you can do it ahead of the third game and nobody bets an eye, then certainly wouldn't be the worst idea. But I mean, you can also say that Hertha and Frankfurt and at the start of January, that doesn't necessarily all scream a murderer's row of opponents. So it's not like Fürth is infinitely easier than those games, even though it's obviously the easiest game at home against Fürth, which is, I think, the worst team in all of Europe's big leagues.
Maybe, yeah, but
1 point.
I'll be honest, I always feel a bit uneasy when it comes to away trips to Berlin and especially also Frankfurt. And Frankfurt seemed to have, rebounded a little bit from their slump. So I would hate it to not have Bellingham.
I mean, Bellingham is obviously a great player. Very good shout to be Dortmund's best outfield player of the season. Especially with Haaland missing so much time. But I mean, I can't think of a scenario where Dortmund rock up to Berlin and, after the game you say, man, if only they had Jude Bellingham, they would have won today. I mean, obviously that could be the case, but I mean, he's not, the most prolific goal scorer. So, I mean, if they draw 1-1, do you say, well, Bellingham would have scored this or that chance?
Yes.
I wouldn't usually, so.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I'd be honest, there's one thing I really worry about right now, and that is obviously COVID, because I feel you can just anecdotally see that it's spreading, and when it's within teams, it also, a lot of cases can come out of one team. I mean, just look at what's going on at Tottenham right now, and it's obviously a factor that is lingering, and you can't count out, and I'm just worried about such a scenario. Dortmund's one of the youth teams had to quarantine recently, so it's still a vicious virus going around. So I just hope in that regard everyone stays safe and healthy and really adheres to all the protocols. And especially in winter, it's tough for a lot of football clubs. So we obviously have the restrictions with the fans right now. And I really do hope that, everyone continues to take it seriously. And I hope it doesn't have too much of an effect, let's say, on the sport and the results and outcomes itself. But it obviously has. Which is just one thing I wanted to add in terms of, you never know who's available the next game. It's a good point. What if half of Dortmund's midfield is out with COVID and then you don't have Bellingham either? That would obviously suck. So, from that perspective, maybe it's a good idea to just stay on 4 yellow cards for as long as possible. But, if we have to go to scoreline predictions, I think Dortmund are going to win this one 3-0.
I'm going with the reverse jinx, leaning fully into my narrative of Bochum being very good at home and saying 1-1 draw.
All right. That's would deliver more cloth for discussion, if you will. So I'm intrigued about that tip, and I'm really intrigued about this matchup against Bochum, because it certainly isn't easy for Dortmund, and we have seen Dortmund to slip up in exactly these games. But I was going to make the point, and I'm feeling a bit scared to make this point, that I feel like Dortmund right now are in a state where these sort of slip-ups don't necessarily happen in the same fashion as they did in the past. But obviously now that I've said it, Dortmund need to live up to what I said, or I'm wrong. So with that in mind, I'll just say that it's time for us to get out of here. So, Lars, thank you very much for coming on and providing your expertise. And please tell our listeners where to follow you on the internet.
Do you know, I much preferred it when you just did it for all the panel.
But I prefer it actually when you say it. It's more fun for me when you are always reluctantly saying it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure nobody has ever clicked on the follow button at Lars Pollmann just because I said it here. So if you want to prove me wrong, then you need to shoot me a line as well, because I obviously wouldn't know, because my account is always growing.
Yeah, I think I hit 18,000 followers after I called Felix Zwayer a joke. I think that thing alone had 2,000 likes. So big Twitter clout now thanks to Felix Zwayer. I should send him a couple of bucks over for this. But no, in all honesty, you can follow me at Stefan Butzko. You can follow all of us at Yellowwallpod if you want to subscribe to this podcast. Do that on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, YouTube, Spotify, etc. If you want to contribute financially, go to patreon.com/theyellowwall. And we will be back with an episode, I guess, between Bochum and Fürth. It's one Englische Woche left in this calendar year. And, I'm enjoying recording the Yellowwallpod these days. So, I always do, obviously, but I'm in a very good mood. So I think we're going to have 2 episodes again next week somehow, if I can schedule it. So, Anyway, as always, thank you for listening and goodbye. And because it's my birthday, the soundboard has decided to work at the end of the podcast. Isn't that nice, guys?